Welcome back, everyone, to the Council of Elrond. Dave, I just want to start off today's episode with a little inspirational quote from someone from Lord of the Rings. It goes a little bit like this. Arise, arise, listeners of podcasts. Spears shall be shaken. The Council of Elrond shall awaken. A sword day, a melon day, ere the sun rises. How does that make you feel, Dave?
Good. Excited.
Good.
Tickled with joy.
Does that give you any clue about who this podcast could be about?
Ooh, I think it might. Who's it going to be about?
Legolas.
I thought so.
So, we're going to get into Theoden's origin story now, Dave. We're going to explain a little bit about what he was doing back in the day before he became king. Don't worry, this is going to be a quick piece. I'm going to go through this in about 2 minutes, but I want to give you a little background as to who he is and his just kind of other important things in his life before we actually meet him in the films. So, Theoden, as we know, was the only son of Thengel. Sorry, we don't know if he's the only son, but now you do. Only son of Thengel, the heir to the throne of Gondor. And his father, Thengel, left Rohan and spent most of his life in Gondor. I think it says when he came to manhood. So he's probably like 16 or something, left Rohan, went to Gondor, and basically grew up there and was like, spent all of his... He sowed his wild oats when he was in Gondor, as they say. So Theoden was born and raised in Gondor. And then for the first 5 years of his life, that's where he lived. And then... he moved back to Rohan when his father became king. He was crowned king after his grandfather Fengel's death. So we know that the languages of Gondor were spoken in King Theoden's halls. Those languages would be Westron, or also known as the Common Tongue, and Sindarin, the kind of high elven language that they speak in Gondor as well. And remember, that's why in Gondor, lots of them refer to Gandalf as Mithrandir, because that's his Sindarin name. So he spoke those two languages, but he also spoke Rohanese, which was the main language of Rohan. So he
not Rohirric, no.
It said Rohanese in the thing that I looked up, but I've heard Rohirric as well. I think that actually could
Rohirric, be yeah. Sounds better. There's definitely a Rohirric, anyways.
There is a Rohirric, yeah, but I think I got this from the Tolkien Gateway, so maybe someone just... It's kind of like, the Wikipedia where people put in their own entries, so maybe...
Right, okay.
Anyway, good... Well pointed out. We'll have to look into that. So when Theoden was about 9 years old, I just added this in as a little aside. But when he was about 9 years old, a man from the north called Thorongil entered the king's service and would live in Rohan and fight alongside the king. This is King Thengel, Theoden's dad, for a number of years until he was eventually summoned to Gondor by the steward Ecthelion, who was Denethor's dad. Guess who, Dave?
That would be another name for Aragorn.
That's correct.
That's
correct.
So that's obviously, yeah. That's his. Is that his Rohan nickname? He obviously goes about. He's wanted in a lot of places. So he's I need an alias anywhere I go.
He's got so many email addresses. He's like, okay, I need a new email address. It's gonna be my Yahoo account. So he was for a time. Aragorn went by the name of Thorongil, and he was just kind of like roaming around the place, hiring out his services of just killing orcs to different people. So he worked in Rohan for a while, and he was in the king's service. This is King Thengel, Theoden's father, and again that is mentioned in an extended scene in the Lord of the Rings films, where obviously Eowyn is speaking to Aragorn and finds out he's so old, and she's like, my uncle says that you rode to war with my grandfather Thengel and all that kind of stuff. So it's cool.
Does she say Thengel in that scene?
I don't recall. I think she does. I think she does. I think she says
so.
I think she says my uncle said a strange thing that you rode to war with my grandfather Thengel. I think so.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting. By the way, I just wanted to add in a little side thing there when you said that Aragorn was going by Thorongil back in the...
Thorongil.
Sorry, Thorongil. He was going by Thorongil back then. It just... my mind instantly just jumps to It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia when Charlie says, oh yeah, Trundle. I think I was going by Trundle back then. And they were like, no, you just couldn't spell Charlie.
Oh, very good. Yeah, Aragorn, not a great speller. So Theoden had a son called Theodred, but he lost his wife in childbirth. And a couple of years later, his father, King Thengel, dies, and he is named the new king of Rohan. So when he was named king, he was already like a single dad. He had 4 sisters, although we don't know anything about 3 of them. We do know that he loved his sister Theodwen dearly, and she lived with him in Edoras. And she had 2 children called Eomer and Eowyn. But when they were 11 and 7 years old, their father was killed by an orc ambush. And not long after that, Theodwen became very ill and died. So then Theoden adopts Eomer and Eowyn and raises them along with Theodred as his own children, basically. And as they get older and stronger, the young boys become fierce warriors, and Theodred gets given the title of the second Marshal of the Riddermark, and Eomer is named third Marshal. And at 66, Theoden's health begins to fail because of the poison Grima is giving to him, and Grima's words take hold of Theoden, and he becomes a puppet of Grima and Saruman, and he loses all control, and this is where we meet him in the movies. So that's a little backdrop to who he is and what he's gone through in that time. So yeah, there you are. Anything there that you didn't really know, or that stands out to you?
The whole 4 sisters. Yeah, we obviously only know about, is it Theowen is the name? Is that what you said? Is Eowyn and Eomer's mother?
Theodwyn.
Theodwyn, yeah, okay.
Theodwyn,
so obviously not very...
It's like Theodred.
Not very adventurous
Eowyn,
in there.
Yeah. They're all kind of...
Theodwyn. Yeah, I know, but one thing I do like, even just hearing about the history of Rohan, and like it is represented on the screen in Peter Jackson's movies as well. Like you do get this look of like Middle Ages and kind of, it's more... It looks more realistic in what life would have been back in the day, and it talks of people like dying of childbirth or dying of just getting sick and dying and just becoming ill, and like they arrive in Theoden's hall and Theoden is ill, but like they don't really know why, and it's just like this would never happen in the land of the elves. Even in Gondor, it's like not as, you don't hear too many stories of people just dying in childbirth. I know Denethor's wife, she kind of went nuts, didn't she? But like I don't know, Rohan just seems more rich in realism, and just like, death is just another part of life in this land, and it's kind of sad to see, but it's more realistic. It's definitely more grounded in reality, I think.
It's just another path that we all must take.
Where are we going to go then? Right,
Minas Tirith, very impressive.
Yeah. Where are we off to next?
Very impressive. So where are we off to next?
Right, so where we are off to next is March to Helm's Deep. Leave none alive. So we're going to move on, and we're going to look at the Helm's Deep section of this podcast, which is going to be pretty epic. So we're going to... Well, first of all, again, we're looking at Helm's Deep, but I don't want to look at the whole Battle of Helm's Deep. I just want to look at Theoden in Helm's Deep and how much of a boss. I know. Oh, pity. We've already done an episode of Helm's Deep. If you want to get that, go back and listen to it. And anyway, Theoden, preparing for battle, tactics. Can you give me any sort of... Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to just spitfire some little like kind of key words at you about Theoden and do this kind of stuff. And I want you to kind of... tell the listeners what you remember from the scenes in the movies. So that's the first one. Right. The battle preparations and the tactics, and maybe a little conversation with Gimli at the gate or at the door of Helm's Deep.
Yeah, so you're asking like what instructions he gives out.
Yeah, but just like can you say what does he do? How does he show his tactical prowess as a king?
His tactical nous. Yeah.
How do we know that he's fought many battles before, for example?
I know you want to get that Theoden quote in there. What does he say? I paid for it with many lives.
No. I want to get the quote where he says, I have fought many battles, Master Dwarf. I know how to defend my own keep.
Yeah, okay, that's right. No, in terms of the tactics, I don't really remember. He does spit out a lot of nonsense about like making sure that you know, the gates are cleared up and have everyone behind the walls. I suppose obvious things will. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So he does have a little conversation with Gimli at the gate, and he's pointed up to above the gate, and he's saying like, you know, we'll cover them from up there, and then he goes, you know, he's kind of just talking about their tactics, and of course he's kind of giving this little speech to the men, and he's kind of going, inside these walls we will outlast them, and they will crash against the wall like water upon rock and things like that, you know, and
that's right, and that's when Aragorn kind of butts in, or is it Aragorn that butts in?
It is
basically
Aragorn,
say like. They're not here to
destroy the crops,
to starve us, or so they're not here to destroy the crop. They're
here to destroy its people. Down to the last child, I believe he says.
They're an army built for one purpose: to destroy the world of men. That might be a different quote from somewhere else.
That's a quote from a different part, but it's still a good quote. They're all good quotes. There are no wrong answers here. Dave, where was Gondor?
Where was Gondor when the Westfold fell? Gondor was in Gondor.
Gondor was in Gondor. Can you just... I'm sorry. I'm basically thinking about stuff and just saying, I want you to read my mind and tell me what I'm thinking. But that's a silly way of doing it. So let's go back to basics. I'm just going to walk through a couple of these scenes. Obviously, so how do we see Theoden as a cool leader and a great king? We see him showing a few of those little battle tactics at the beginning, talking to the guys, saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. You guys are going to stand over there. We're going to outlast them in these walls. It's going to be a waiting game, you know. Then Aragorn says to him, like, look, what you just said there, look, they're not coming here to destroy Rohan's crops or its houses. Yeah. They're going to destroy its people, down to the last child. And then Theoden is like, look at my men. You know, go back to our quotes we've already had.
That
like, you know,
courage hangs by a thread.
Well done. The correct preposition.
In a thread.
On a thread?
Beside a thread.
Under a thread.
Under two threads.
Reddit thread. So yeah, so basically that's... Aragorn kind of butts in with that, and then we see that he's actually just trying to save face in front of his men. He's like, look at my men, their courage hangs by a thread. You can see like, he's actually just trying to, you know, pump his men up and make his men think, we do stand a chance. Like, but he's like really that's kind of going, we're kind of screwed.
Aragorn, he can't read the room, he can't take a goddamn hint. He's like,
to be fair to Aragorn, he was half dead at the time. You know, he didn't know what was going on.
That's true.
Definitely suffered a massive concussion. He should have laid down for a while.
Yeah, well, Legolas was telling him to constantly lay down, but unfortunately for him, he was acting pure like Dwight from The Office, where he just couldn't read the goddamn room, and he's like, "But my lord, they're not here to like destroy the crops; they're here to kill us all. Even that woman right over there, see her?
She'll soon be
dead." Yeah.
Yes, you, ma'am, you will soon be dead. So then, what have I written down here? I've written down, so it begins.
Yes.
So obviously basically when the battle is starting, that's that kind of cool quote that we get from Theoden when it just starts to like piss rain, and again there's another moment where the music cuts out, it's silent, and we hear that the first kind of drops, and it's so cool, the sound of the drops on the armor, and then Theoden with that quote, so it begins, and then the music comes in.
Which is like the elven theme.
It's kind of the elven theme, yeah. But it's weird because the Uruk-hai are marching, and that's what comes in then. But it's still, it works. It works, you guys. It's okay.
Oh, it works, yeah.
So it begins.
And then the whole way, like through that battle, we see Theoden commanding his men throughout, leading from the front line. He's up at the top. He's shouting orders. He's like, "Hold them! Push them back!" And then he goes down to the front line and stuff. He's like to the gate, and they go down, and he's like stabbing some orcs, and he gets a spear in the shoulder, and he's like, you know, right on the front line. That's where you want your king. And then obviously moving on, we get towards the end, and it's the morning is coming, and he looks pretty defeated, and he's wondering what men can do against such reckless hate. And Aragorn says, "Ride out with me, ride out and meet them for Rohan." For your people.
For death and glory.
And what does Theoden say before death? For death and glory?
For united.
So when Aragorn says for Rohan, for your people.
For death and glory.
Maybe he says that, but then what does he say next? He says one word.
Yes.
Exactly. That's what I'm looking at. He just goes, yes. And he repeats, I think he says it twice.
He does say for death and glory first, I think, because Aragorn is trying to, like, you know, give him reasons. He's like trying to encourage him like a puppy. And
What
then
do you mean?
He's like,
oh wait,
you know,
for death and glory. Yeah.
He's just like, you know, come on, for Rohan, and he's like, for death and glory. And he's like, yes, yes.
So that's a cool part. Like, and Aragorn
Many lives.
Yeah, we've paid for it with many lives. And then that the final then ride out on their horses for death and glory, and they're like slaying and slewing all the way along, and it's like there's absolutely destroying all the Uruk-hai. It's so cool.
Hewing and slewing.
Yeah.
If Tolkien was to put it.
So some lines from the book are given to different characters in the films. For example, it's actually Éomer in the book who says, "Now for wrath, now for ruin, and a red nightfall," at the battle in the Peleannor Fields. But film Éomer is also given some of Theoden's lines, so it all kind of evens out. Yeah, so that's the main breakdown of the film version of Helm's Deep. There's one other thing that I wanted to mention, which is the film gives us a little kind of an Easter egg when they're preparing for the battle, and Gamling is helping Theoden put on his armor, and the whole "Who am I" Gamling scene, which is awesome as well.
Yeah.
There is a little Easter egg there, which is that we get a little snippet from what's called the Lament for the Rohirrim, which is also known and identified by its first line, which is "Where now the horse and the rider." This is a song about Earl. Do you know who Earl was, Dave? Well, Earl was...
My name is Earl.
So Earl, what's the main thing that they shout? Fourth
Aerlingus.
Fourth Aerlingus, not the Irish airline, but they say fourth Aerlingus, but it comes from the word Earl, which is this man who basically started the house of Rohan, and so he would be
the House of Earl.
He would be Theoden of the House of Earl. Exactly. So that'd be kind of like, you know, their ancient king who they all kind of look up to and all that kind of stuff. So he's of the House of Earl. So there's this song about Earl, and it's called "The Lament for the Rohirrim." And this poem was written, again, I love this stuff. I was looking into it the other day, and it's like there's a poem or a song that was written about this guy, and it's gone down, written by a forgotten poet. It's just, it makes it feel so real to life that this is a real thing, and it's all just written by Tolkien. He's like he's secretly behind there kind of going, so a forgotten poet wrote a song about a guy who I invented, and this is the song. It's so crazy.
No, you know more than I do that Tolkien was just sitting there, and he was just like, and we shall call him I can't think of a name. Let's just say he was forgotten. He was like, that'll get them going. Yeah. And it really did.
Oh, really got it. But like, there's a whole history of where this song was from and all that kind of stuff. So basically, the poem was written by a forgotten poet for Earl long before the War of the Ring. And on the way to Edoras, Aragorn chants a poem in the Rohirrim language, the Rohanese or the Rohirric, whichever it is. And he does this to characterize the Rohirrim. And the text is not given, and afterwards Legolas comments that the sound of the words resembles the land of Rohan. And then Aragorn recites his translation of it, which is this poem. I'm going to read it for you now. Where now the horse and the rider? Where is the horn that was blowing? Where is the helm and the hauberk and the bright hair flowing? Where is the hand on the harpstring and the red fire glowing? Where is the spring and the harvest and the tall corn growing? They have passed like rain on the mountain, like a wind in the meadow. The days have gone down in the west behind the hills into shadow. Who shall gather the smoke of the dead wood burning, or beholds the flowing years from the sea returning?
Wow.
Kind of a cool little poem there. And we get a clip of Theoden. I can't remember how much of that he recites. He definitely recites maybe about 4 lines of it. And do you remember? It's like a voiceover when there's like these angles looking up at him, and there's a bright light coming in behind him, and he's getting his gear on. He keeps
flashing in between. Yeah, he's getting the shin pads done, and he keeps flashing between like the women and the children, but then also flashing to the Uruk-hai marching. And there's a couple of lines, a couple of words in there that are very familiar. Yeah.
I think it cuts out to then, and it goes to, how has it come to this? And then it cuts kind of back into like
the music
reality.
Comes back down. One thing that I've loved, I remember when I went to see the Hobbit movies, and I remember going like, wow, that's like they are whatever. But one thing that's very noticeable about them is all the music and the little song pieces that they have. So obviously, like in Bilbo's, you know, that's what Bilbo Baggins hates. And then you've got the Misty Mountain Cool song,
Misty Mountain Hop,
and
by Led Zeppelin.
And then you've got the goblins and all that. So the Goblin King song. And they're so obvious.
Goblin
they're like
Town,
they're musical numbers, down in Goblin Town. But then you're like, oh, but that's kind of cool because they're in the book. But one thing, and you think like the Lord of the Rings doesn't do any of that. But like there's so many parts where Aragorn, you know, he might sing the Lay of Lethin, or there's, you know, obviously the Hobbits sing a little bit, and there's so many times where it's just a couple of lines, but it just blends so well into the movies.
Exactly, and like in this, that voiceover, you would never know that was from a song. It's just Theoden saying like, because he says a couple of those lines.
But
I definitely recognize the parts where he says,
well.
"Where now the horse and the rider?" Yeah, so it's got, but that's it. Like the history of this is that it was a poem which then was converted into a song, and so it is poetic, of course. And yeah, I agree with what you're saying, because maybe in the Hobbit movies it's more like, and now it's time for the musical number, and they kind of cut away to that. And it kind of is kind of cool for those movies, and they are a little bit more aimed at a younger audience, so it kind of works, especially that one in Bilbo's house. But I think in Lord of the Rings, I agree. I think I love how it's subtly done.
There's so many times, like even if you're just if you've never read the book, any of the books, and you're just skimming through, there's so many times where there's so many times where you see you know, a page and there'll be writing at the top, writing at the bottom, but in the middle there's like a really squished together italic bunch of verses, and you're like, oh, here's a musical number, or here's a poem or a song. And like you don't realize when you're watching Lord of the Rings, because the tone never shifts. It's always like, you know, Treebeard will be walking around and then suddenly he just starts speaking some nonsense gibberish, and you're like, this is so cool. But he's actually
he's
telling
singing
you a
all
song.
the time as well. Yeah, and most of them are lifted straight from the pages. Yeah,
exactly. That's what I mean. You go back and you actually read the book, and you're like, oh, this is familiar to me because I've seen it 100 times, and I've never really known what I was listening to or watching. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, exactly. Love it. Yeah,
movies that keep on giving.
So much death.
So, just to quickly then go over the book version of Helm's Deep, and it's, again, we've spoken about this in our Helm's Deep breakdown video, which was that in the book it's a lot more understated. It's not as big a deal. It's like the 6th chapter of the 2nd book or something. It's one short chapter and it just moves on, and it's like whatever. It's not like it's this hour and 20-minute sequence of the movie, which is what we get. You know, that's the whole movie builds that, and then that's the big epic you know, crescendo of the film, and that's it. But in the book anyway, it's a little bit, it's a lot faster. It goes by. Obviously one of the biggest differences is that the elves don't show up in the book. It's just men, and it's kind of like, that's, again, I can see why purists who were massive fans of the book before the movies came out, I can see why they would not like that, because it's this big, it's the defining moment of men to try and, like, you know, they could be wiped out if they lose this battle. It's like that could be the end of men, pretty much. Like, you know, it's just that'd be the defenses that could come to Gondor's aid. It's like if Rohan fell in that moment, then Gondor would have fallen straight afterwards. So it was a big important moment for men to stand up. But so that's one main difference, of course. They battle the orcs through the night, of course. They successfully defend the Hornburg. And after the wall has been breached, the king starts to doubt the strength of the fortress, and he wonders if the Hornburg might fall. And he says, and I quote, "How shall any tower withstand such numbers and such reckless hate? The end will not be long, but I will not end here. Taken like an old badger in a trap, Snowmane and the horses on my guard are in the inner court. The dawn comes. I will bid my men sound Helm's horn, and I will ride forth. Will you ride with me then, son of Arathorn? Maybe we shall cleave a road, or make such an end as will be worth a song, if any be left to sing us hereafter. I will ride with you," said Aragorn. So,
it's great.
First of all, what is a big important detail that's different from that than in the movies?
It was just kind of encapsulated by everything, so
right.
I don't
okay.
really know. but also,
okay.
I just before we get into it, I just think I was also thinking about all the similar pieces that were taken out and used in the film, like the such an end part and all those little things. I'm just wondering, like, was it Fran Walsh that had to like pour over all the books and then just be like,
such a huge task?
it's such a job. Like, imagine just being like, you're not writing a script. You're just changing this and manipulating it into a way that suits the movie. But sorry, please continue.
No, that's okay. But basically, let me give you a quick breakdown of what I was going to go back and say. So here, Theoden says, when the dawn comes, I will bid my men sound Helm's horn, and I will ride forth. Yeah. Will you ride with me, son of Arathorn?
Yeah, it's him asking Aragorn.
In the movies, he says, so much death. What can men do against such reckless hate? And he's like, let's just give up, will we? And Aragorn says, ride out with me. Ride out and meet them.
Yeah.
And he's like, yes. So,
yeah, you're right. It's Aragorn being his hype man. But like, even though you said like he's kind of given up there, I never felt like that in the movies. I just felt like, he's having a little bit of a lapse of concentration, and he's wounded. He wants to have a little bitch and moan.
He does have that sometimes in the books as well. He does have moments, like very like short moments of lapses of, I don't know, just kind of. He's a bit down
judgment
at times.
And confidence and
lack of confidence, because again he is a man, and that's again a big difference that we see in the books between for example, Legolas or something. He's always just so men are weak. He's always Legolas is always so like, all right guys, come on, we can keep going, and just but men doubt themselves.
Just walk on the snow.
Yeah, come on, you guys. Run up the rocks that are falling.
No, dig up, stupid.
So I think that is an important detail that and we've already mentioned this today in this podcast, that you love Theoden from watching the movies, but then when you read the books, you're like, he's even better than he is in the movies, because he doesn't have that doubtful moment there, and he is the one that encourages Aragorn to ride out with him. And he says, like, this is what I'm going to do, and we're going to do it, and it's going to make such an end as will be worth a song, if any be left to sing of us hereafter. So he's like, it's brilliant. Even if everybody's dead and there's no one left to sing a song about us, it will still be worth a song, and that's good enough for me.
Worth it.
Yeah, worth it.
Oh, lads, come on, it'll be worth it. Yeah,
so, just to quickly read on a little bit more. So then, a little quote: as the great horn sounded, the riders shouted, "Helm for Theoden King!" And with that shout the king came. His horse was white as snow, golden was his shield, and his spear long. At his right hand was Aragorn, Elendil's heir. Behind him rode the lords of the house of Earl the Young. Light sprang in the sky. Forth there Lingus! With a cry and a great noise they charged. Down the gates they roared, over the causeway they swept, and they drove through the hosts of Isengard as a wind among grass. So, that's a pretty epic description there from Tolkien.
Awesome, yeah.
He had to get that mention of grass in at the very end there. So he's like, wait a minute, we got to mention nature, you guys, come on.
Yeah, just like, sorry, that last line again, read it one more time.
They drove through the host of Isengard as a wind among grass.
I'm just surprised it didn't go, as a wind among grass, quite similarly to the grass that we see in Buckleberry Ferry. That's just like another page to describe the kind of grass that it used to be like.
Oh, he did, I just had to cut all that part out.
For Rohan.
Right, so that's Helm's Deep wrapped up, difference between the movies and the films. So we're going to move swiftly on, like wind through grass, and we're going to look at another small thing that was kind of left out of the movies, which was the mention of the Red Arrow. Do you know anything about the Red Arrow, Dave?
Yeah. The Red Arrow, that's I think... okay, I'm just going to say something, and it could be wrong, but I'm going to just say it confidently. No, but I think, again, in the films, there's a lot of emphasis on the beacons being lit, and there isn't as much in the books, because, in fact, I know now this is jumping ahead a bit, but when Gandalf and Pippin are riding towards Minas Tirith, they're just kind of like, oh Jesus, look, there's the beacons lit there beside us.
It's jumping back.
Oh, it's jumping back. Okay, sorry, we're jumping back. But yeah, Gandalf is like, oh my God, look there. Or Pippin is like, what's going on over there? Like, the beacons are lit, and they're like, oh right, so there's none of that Pippin going up and lighting the beacons.
I believe that's the first chapter of the third book. I think it's like the first few pages where Gandalf and Pippin are riding to Minas Tirith, that they see the beacons being lit. But well done. I'm so proud of you, Dave. Well done. Fantastic.
Thanks. So, but anyways, to answer your question about the Red Arrow, that's where, that's basically, that was the ceremonial. I was going to say gift, but it's the ceremonial thing that Gondor presents Rohan with. Like, we need help. We need aid. It is a summons, yeah.
Yeah,
I guess.
so you are correct as well in saying that the beacons, the lighting of the beacons, in the book, it was just like a throwaway comment, like, oh, the beacons are lit. And the way that it worked is that the beacons didn't actually reach from Gondor, all the way to Rohan. There was only about 6 beacons, I think, that reached out, like, a certain stretch. And then it reached the nearest, like, big town. And then from there, riders set out with this red arrow. And then they went to... So there was like a combination of the beacons and then a red arrow that were used in order to summon Rohan to go and help Gondor. But this was not something that happened very often. And Theoden actually says that in all his years, he's never seen a red arrow. So it's like, it's a very unusual thing. So...
what the hell does that mean? Are we cursed? Theoden is like, Theoden wouldn't know what to do. Was there any message attached?
Oh my
to
god,
the arrow?
I didn't read the book, the instructions. What was the red arrow again? Does that mean turn around and go home? Or you're too late, they're all dead?
Does that mean someone's asking me to be their Valentine? Is this Cupid?
We see in the book that they're all riding along, and it says later that evening an errand rider of Gondor arrives and hands a red arrow to Theoden, and it says, quote, black feathered and barbed with steel, but the point was painted red. And this guy, he passes on the message and he says, quote, Gondor is in great need. Often the Rohirrim have aided us, but now the Lord Denethor asks for all your strength and all your speed, lest Gondor fall at last. And then holding the red arrow, Theoden says, the red arrow has not been seen in the mark in all my years. Has it indeed come to that? Then
they requested all their speed. I like that part.
And all their drugs. Give us all your speed and all your meth. So then...
the Methutheld.
Although Theoden hoped to have 10,000 spears, he says, it will be less now, yet 6,000 at the least shall ride behind me. And then Theoden tells the rider, say to Denethor that in this hour the king of the mark himself will come down to the land of Gondor, though maybe he will not ride back. So, again, Theoden, he's always put himself in, like, at the front line and in harm's way.
He just wants to die.
I think he's obsessed with, like, a glorious end, because he's like, what? He's like, I know my line has ended. My son's dead. So I may as well go out with a bang. And so they're all going to write a song about me, and it's going to be class.
For death and glory.
So that was kind of a small change, but we're going to move on then to actually the battle at the Peleannor Fields, and we're going to see some of that as well. So again, we're going to start with the film part, and some standout moments from the battle were Theoden's speech, of course, the music, the horns, the death. What are your emotions and your feels on that, Dave?
I think it's come to this now where I'm just going to say, like, this is my absolute favorite part of all 3 movies. It's definitely the part where the goosebumps arise on my arm.
Arise, goosebumps up the neck.
Yeah, but it's absolutely epic. Just the speech, and the build up and the camera shots and everything. I absolutely love the scene.
Everything
to death.
The best.
I love the scene to death. But yeah, and it's also an incredible scene in the book, or it's an incredible read in the book. And
don't you worry, we're going to get to it.
I know it's coming, but I think one of the cool things, I think you might have seen it, but Tolkien actually reading that part from the book, and somebody has edited it to put like the music behind it, and it's just
I have seen that. It's pretty
stellar.
Epic. Yeah, it's amazing. I'm pretty sure that Ian McKellen based his voice of Gandalf on Tolkien's voice as well, just for if people didn't know that as well. So the way that he spoke, I think he kind of based that on hearing little clips of Tolkien.
Not
speaking.
Surprised.
So,
sometimes it's very hard to understand Tolkien. He's just like, when I'm going here and I walk over there. It's very Gandalf.
That's where Gandalf got his mumbling from. So, So we are going to read that. We're going to do a bit of reading now from the book. Reading from the book of the Return of the King. But first of all, in the movie, we do get like that. It's got to be the most epic speech before a battle. I mean, one thing that
There's
I always...
so many that Lord of the Rings
I know, but like the thing
best.
is, in the third film, when you get that scene, you get that charge, I always feel a bit sorry for Aragorn when he's like marching on the Black Gate. I'm just like, he just could never match the epicness of Theoden's speech, even though he is the king.
Though.
It's still pretty epic. But I just feel that Theoden's one just really outshines Aragorn's, even though I love Aragorn's one as well. But it's
one thing
amazing.
I love about Aragorn's one is when he pulls out the sword facing his troops, and then the camera pans around Aragorn, and the horse
swivels around,
and then jumps, does that little just before like, and he's got the sword in the air. I was thinking that
is an amazing camera shot.
How long did they take to do that little move with the horse? Because that was perfect. Yeah, like that must have taken ages, and there's none of that in the behind the scenes. I don't remember there being so.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know anything about that scene, but that's an epic shot. I know exactly the one you're talking about. But anyway, we'll have to do another podcast on that. So going back to this one, we get the big speech from Theoden. I'm going to do a little bit more on that in a moment. The music comes in, and I could talk for an hour on the music as well. The horns, I love this. We were talking about this the last time we watched it as well, that you're like, is it really nerdy that someone can blow a horn and I can be like, that's an orc horn, that's an elf horn, that's a Gondor horn, that's a Rohan horn?
Yeah.
It's like,
that is no orc horn.
That is no orc horn.
Like the elven one. And then obviously the Haradrim there.
That's Dave. I didn't know that you had the skill of horn blowing with your empty hand. Right, moving on from the horns, we get the death, the charge, and obviously we spoke about this in our other episode before. We spoke about the way that they use the technologies, the software that we use to render all of those horses crashing into the orcs. It's just an absolute feat, and an absolute, like, no wonder they won an Oscar for that kind of thing. And then we get to, like, obviously the battle between Éowyn and the Witch King. Again, I don't want to focus on that because we're all here for Theoden. So Theoden's death is the next thing that I want to look at, which is, he's lying there under a snowman.
Finally.
And he's like, are you going to sing a song about this?
Yeah, please. And someone's like, oh, balls, we just missed it.
So then, anyway, Theoden speaking to Éowyn at his death, and his whole, I go to my father's, in whose mighty company I no longer feel ashamed, or I shall not now feel ashamed, or whatever it is.
That's
controversial,
so sad.
Dave.
Yeah.
But for me, this always gets me much more emotional than the "you bow to no one" scene.
Oh yeah. Oh god, yeah. Like
because I don't know why, but the stuff that I see online, it seems like everyone's always like, "This is the biggest tear-jerking scene in the whole trilogy," where they say you bow to no one. I love that scene. Don't get me wrong; I love it as well. Yeah, but I never. I do well up a little bit at that scene as well, I suppose. But this one, where he's talking about, he's always not felt like that he's been, as living up to his fathers and like all his forefathers to their expectations. Mm-hmm. He hasn't been as good a king. He feels that like he's let his town fall into ruin. He's like this, like, I fell under the spell of Grima and Saruman. I've let my son die when I wasn't even paying attention at the throne. Basically, he's so full of guilt, and now he's finally saying, I don't feel ashamed anymore. And for me, I'm always just like, oh my god, this is so deep. And I think this and Boromir's death, two moments in the film that really get me.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, it's always going to be a sad death that trumps like a happy, a happy ending for a tearjerker moment. But yeah, like I actually had been thinking this as you've been talking through this episode about, like, because I was thinking about that where he says before he dies, like, now I'm not ashamed to reside with my forefathers or whatever, or, like, to be known amongst them. And I was thinking, like, it's because in the movies you don't really see much of this, because straight away after he's healed by Gandalf, he's like, right, straight away off to war, and there's none of this like, where was Gondor when the Westfold fell? Like, he doesn't have any of that in him. He wants to ride out and kill all the orcs, and then straight away he's off battling, helping Gondor, and he's like, for death and glory. He's always talking about death. We don't get any of that in the movie. We don't get much of that in the movie, so you're not constantly thinking, why is he in such a rush to to be so good and like to do as much as he can and know he's risking death. And it's probably because he feels so guilty for all these years. He's literally sat there, done nothing. He's missed the death of his son.
Yeah.
Obviously his nephew, who's like his son, is imprisoned on kind of his orders.
It's like it was under his watch, basically.
Under his watch, and he's just let Rohan crumble.
That guilt has been eaten away at him, and he's like, the only thing I can do now is try to lead my men to glory, and I can just have a glorious death on the battlefield, and that's just the only thing I can do now to really feel like I'm living up to my fathers before me. So it
does get me that part, all right, yeah. Where he says like, now I should not feel shame. What's the quote? Read that line one more time.
I don't have it in front of me, but I can quote it from my memory. It's not going to be exact, but he says, "I go to my fathers now, in whose mighty company I no longer feel ashamed."
Yeah, it's just like, you just kind of feel like, why should you feel ashamed, Lord Theoden?
I know.
King Theoden. But like, I think
he's human, and he has these like his self-doubt, and he's got that lack of confidence, and it's amazing. Again, it's such a human thing that he has, and I love it. I think it's fantastic.
I think it might be a little bit of like how the book, the whole passage of time, it takes place over about a year, whereas like in the film, I think the difference from when he's healed and when they're like planning out the battle of Helm's Deep, it kind of feels like years later, and he's like all there, like, you know, planning tactics, and Aragorn's like, war is upon you whether you want it or not, and he's just kind of like chilling. He's just kind of like, he's chilling, and he doesn't feel like he's in a rush to, you know, to do right by all the wrongs that he's done in the last couple of years or so. And then same again when he's complaining about like, where was Gondor when we needed their help. Yeah, I suppose it's a big difference. You just kind of feel like the passage of time is completely different in the film.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that probably does add to a little bit. There are, I'm going to bring it up in a short moment, of just a couple of different moments in the film where maybe I understand the reasons behind it, but I think maybe it kind of does take away a little bit from the character of Theoden. But moving on, I want to just go back and reference the speech again for a moment. So I just want to look in detail at the speech. So first of all, we see Theoden instructing his units, and he tells them, he's like, "Oh, you are gonna flank over here, and Éomer, you're gonna take your men to the east, and blah blah, and my bannermen are gonna come down the middle." And then he says, "Forth, and fear no darkness." And then he launches directly into his speech, which is, "Arise, arise, riders of Theoden! Spears shall be shaken, shields shall be splintered. A sword day, a red day, ere the sun rises." And then the part where he raises his sword and he rides along the front line, clattering it off the assembled riders' spears as they ready for their charge. And then he calls, ride now, ride for ruin and the world's ending." And then the big glorious death ×3. Death! And they all join in the chorus, and then they blow on the horns, and it's all like, right, off we go now into battle. And they're all like pumped up. And there's one particular Rohirric rider that you and I love, who's just so eager to get into the orcs. He's just like galloping along. Yeah.
He's like charging to get ahead because he's like, I just can't wait to kill.
I can't wait to get in there. Theoden has pumped me up so much. He's hyped. He hyped me up. So that is the speech, obviously, from the films. Now, I'm going to go into the details with the differences in the book, and we're going to look at some details that are different from the speech as well. So, first of all, as Theoden and the Rohirrim approach Minas Tirith, those who had ridden out before, the kind of scouts, they report back that, quote, "There are great fires, Lord. The city is all set about with flame, and the field is full of foes." So they'd gone out scouting ahead, and they came back and they gave this news, and they can see fires everywhere because it's also, at this point, it's the middle of the night. It's really, really dark. They're still quite a little bit away from the actual battlefield. So Theoden turns to his men and he says, I'm going to just open up my book here, get a few quotes out because I'm going to be reading through a nice little passage from this. So Theoden turns and he says to his men, "Now is the hour come, riders of the mark, sons of Earl. Foes and fire are before you and your homes far behind. Yet, though you fight upon an alien field, the glory that you reap there shall be your own forever. Oaths ye have taken, now fulfill them all, to lord and land and league of friendship. So, does that sound familiar, that last part?
Yeah.
Oaths ye have taken, now fulfill them all, to lord of land and league of friendship. Who says that in the film? Because it's not Theoden.
Oaths ye have taken. Is it Aragorn?
Nope.
Ooh. Give me a hint.
It is... I can't give you a hint without giving it away, maybe.
Give me the scene.
It is said when they're setting out from Rohan. They're setting out from Edoras, and they're like about to begin the journey.
Yeah. Hammer as he's... is it Hammer? No? Or gambling?
Nope. It is Éomer.
Ooh, Éomer. Oh, yes. He's shouting out all the things as people are getting ready and packing their horses. Yeah,
so the quote
it's very
from
kind of depressing.
It's
very much like not depressing, but like
I think it's quite.
Hope.
I think it's quite uplifting. I think it's like, maybe not uplifting. Maybe that's not the right word, but I think it's kind of like,
Is this kind of like when you thought that when Frodo says "naked in the dark"? That sounds really, really nice.
I love being naked in the dark.
This waking eye, naked in the dark. And you're just like, well, at least he put in one nice little thing there
in the jacuzzi.
Yeah.
The quote is, "Oaths ye have taken, now fulfill them all, to lord and land." There, that's where Éomer stops. He says, "To lord and land." He's on the back of his horse. He goes, "Yeah!" And they all like march out. But in the book, he says, "To lord and land and league of friendship," which is maybe not. It's a little bit like, I don't know, league of friendship. It's not as kind of modern cool as maybe it was in Tolkien's time. He's like, "To league of friendship,
master of karate and friendship for everyone."
Dayman. So I'm going to continue reading there. The next part is, "Men clash spear upon shield. Éomer, my son, you lead the first Ered," said Theoden, "and it shall go behind the king's banner in the centre. Elfhelm, lead your company to the right when we pass the wall, and Grimbold shall lead his towards the left. Let the other companies behind follow these three that lead, as they have chance. Strike wherever the enemy gathers. Other plans we cannot make, for we know not yet how things stand upon the field. Forth now, and fear no darkness."
Fear no darkness.
Again, remember the quote from the movie is that's how he starts. That's how he starts his speech. He kind of
arise.
Exactly. So it's very similar how he's given commands to Éomer and to Grimbold. And he's saying to them, "You go here, you go there, you're going to flank them down the left." And then he says to them, "Forth now and fear no darkness." And then he goes, "Arise, arise." But in the book, it's actually the middle of the night when he's saying this. So it kind of makes sense. It's like, fear no darkness, because it is completely dark. And also, remember, even daytime at this moment was pretty dark. It doesn't get bright at all.
Clouds.
Yeah, because there's clouds overhead everywhere. So it's completely dark. So it also makes a little bit more sense even in that. And so then, obviously, instead of like going straight into his speech at that point, they have to actually ride on, and they go forward, and they move on to I think they're about a league away. It says that they're a league from the outer Ramas Gate, which are all the gates that are around Minas Tirith.
Oh yeah, the Ramas Core.
Yeah, exactly. So they're a good league away from that. So they carry on anyway. And it says that they're unchallenged in this whole thing. So all the orcs are kind of just completely obsessed with battling against the walls of Minas Tirith. So they're kind of unnoticed that they're moving onto the field, and they're silently moving onto the field of battle. And there's all these fires everywhere. And then basically it says that Theoden gave no signal. Again, I'm reading from the book. It says, "At last he halted once again. The city was now nearer. A smell of burning was in the air, and a very shadow of death. The horses were uneasy, but the king sat upon Snowmane, motionless, gazing upon the agony of Minas Tirith, as if stricken suddenly by anguish or by dread. He seemed to shrink down, cowed by age. Merry himself felt as if a great weight of horror and doubt had settled on him. His heart beat slowly. Time seemed poised in uncertainty. They were too late. Too late was worse than never. Perhaps Theoden would quail, bow his old head, turn, slink away to hide in the hills." So we'll pause there for a moment and ask you, Dave, do you think that's what happened? Do you think that's what Theoden did? Did he
No, I think
turn away to
he
hide
was
in
very
hills?
wrong about thinking about that. No, Theoden would... Sure, he rode all this way to die.
Yeah, exactly. But this is, again, another human moment of doubt and just horror of Theoden. He's arrived here, he sees the whole city's burning. There's like hundreds of thousands of orcs just everywhere. He's like, oh my God, what have I done? How is it?
And there is that moment... there is that moment in the movie as well when they arrive and the camera pans over to the orcs and you hear the horn of the orcs as well, and there's that look in his eyes, like maybe that's where he's thinking this thought, and he's kind of looking around. He's like, oh dear God! But then he's like,
what, when he's like, reform the line, that part.
No. Before they they do that when they're charging against the Haradrim and the Mumakil.
Yeah.
But like before that, when they just first arrive, and there is that lovely moment of like hope when the Rohirrim are seen like coming over the hill or whatever.
Yeah,
but like it does show Theoden's perspective, and he's looking down and he sees
like
tens of thousands of orcs. What have I done? But he's like, I've come this far.
Yeah, look. Sure, it's going to be a great
Come here to me now. Hearken to me.
Hearken to me. Hearken to me, orcs. So I'm gonna read on because this is what Merry is looking at. He sees the king and he sees that he's like slumped upon his horse and he's just completely silent and he's looking at, as I said here, gazing upon the agony of Minas Tirith. I love that description there. So reading on, it says, then suddenly Merry felt it at last, beyond doubt, a change. Wind was in his face, light was glimmering. Far, far away in the south, the clouds could be dimly seen as remote grey shapes rolling up, drifting. Morning lay beyond them. So any kind of mention of the fact that there's light that could possibly be seen was like such a big deal, because obviously they were, surrounded by darkness and clouds and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But that's also the same as the movies. Like when they arrive, that's kind of like the break of morning.
Sure.
It's the first bit of light. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So, then it says, but at the same moment there was a flash, as if lightning had sprung from the earth beneath the city. For a searing second it stood dazzling off in black and white, its topmost tower like a glittering needle, and then as the darkness closed again, there came a rolling over the fields, a great boom. At that sound, the bent shape of the king sprang suddenly erect. Tall and proud he seemed again, and rising in his stirrups, he cried in a loud voice, more clear than any there had ever heard a mortal man achieve before. That's pretty cool.
Wow.
And so he cries, and he says, arise, arise, riders of Theoden! Fell deeds awake, fire and slaughter. Spears shall be shaken, shields be splintered. A sword day, a red day, ere the sun rises. Ride now, ride now, ride to Gondor. Get goosebumps.
Yeah.
So
deadly.
Now there's a few more.
Like a pirate there, though.
Okay.
Just one pirate. What did he say? He said like shields shall be
fire and slaughter. Is it?
No, he says like shields be breaking.
Yeah, he says shields be splintered. Yeah. Shiver me timbers.
Shields be splinters. Shiver me timbers.
Right, Theoden, the Pirate King.
Come on, you sea rats!
So there's a few moments of just epicness. We've already looked at one of them. The first one is that he shouts this command or this speech, and it says, he cried in a loud voice more clear than any there had ever heard a mortal man achieve before. So,
wow.
I mean, that's pretty high praise. And so this is like your king, but he's also just like, he's going to seem like, he's not even a mortal man anymore. He's just shouting, and this is crazy. Yeah. So then, moving on to the next one. With that, he seized a great horn from Guthlaf, his banner bearer, and he blew such a blast upon it that it burst asunder. I absolutely love that. He just grabs a horn off some random beside him, blows into it, and the horn just explodes because he's just so powerful. Like, I love it. And then it says, and straight away all the horns in the host were lifted up in music, and the blowing of the horns of Rohan in that hour was like a storm upon the plain and a thunder in the mountains. Oh, God. It's so cool. So he just like leads the chorus, but his horn just breaks because he's got such powerful lungs, David. You know that about Theoden.
He's just like, oh my God, my throat is going to be wrecked in the morning. I hope I die.
Yeah, if he didn't die in battle, he would have died from just like collapsed lung or something.
Yeah, but even just like shouting that loud, he's just like, oh man, I'm going to have no voice tomorrow morning.
Yeah, get the strepsils
on the tea, the strepsils and the honey.
So then it continues on, and again he's shouting, ride now, ride to Gondor. One more little bit before the end of this chapter. So suddenly the king cried to Snowmane. This is so epic. And the horse sprang away. Behind him his banner blew in the wind, white horse upon a field of green, but he outpaced it. After him thundered the knights of his horse, but he was ever before them. Eomer rode there, the white horsetail on his helm, floating in the speed, and the front of the first Ered roared like a breaker foaming to the shore, but Theoden could not be overtaken. Fey he seemed, or the battle fury of his fathers ran like new fire in his veins, and he was borne up on Snowmane like a god of old, even as Orome the Great in the battle of the Valar when the world was young. His golden shield was uncovered, and lo, it shone like an image of the sun, and the grass flamed into green about the white feet of his steed, for morning came, morning and a wind from the sea, and darkness was removed, and the hosts of Mordor wailed, and terror took them, and they fled and died, and the hooves of wrath rode over them. And then all the hosts of Rohan burst into song, and they sang as they slew, for the joy of battle was on them, and the sound of their singing that was fair and terrible came even to the city.
Oh, wow. Jesus. It's a lot to digest there.
A lot to
First
digest,
of all,
yeah.
I want to address this crazy psychopathic, like, slewing and singing at the same time.
That's
like, it's
so funny now. Because it says
crazy.
The joy of battle was on them. That's so great.
Like, what, they've gone from like doom and death to just like singing their way to like beheading orcs, and then that singing makes its way to the city. But
War is the province of men, David. You see.
Yeah, we've got a comparison of Theoden to Orome.
So this is it. I said already that there are a few epic, almost greater than man, greater than human moments for Theoden. First of all is his shouting and his speech, where it's the loudest voice that they ever heard a mortal man achieve. Before then, he's blowing a horn, and the horn explodes because it can't contain his breath, and then he leads the charge, and it's all this thing about saying how, like, you know, it describes the speed at which all of these guys are riding. But it says 3 times, I think, it says that that Theoden was it says Theoden could not be overtaken. It says he was ever before them, and it also says that I can't remember. I can't find the third part, but I think there were 3 mentions of that. Basically, they couldn't overtake him. He was just charging too fast in there. And it says, yes, you're correct. Born up on Snowmane like a god of old, even as Orome the Great in the Battle of the Valar. So there's not many times, if any, when a man is referred to as one of the Valar, Orome.
Or compared to,
compared to as one of the Valar. So it's like, this is really, really high praise. And it's like, we kind of like don't really remember that Theoden is just this like god of a man, basically.
A man. But like, I'm trying to think, because that does not sound familiar to me at all. So I'm trying to think, I think the last time I would have read the Return of the King would have been before I read the Silmarillion. Like, the last time I read the Return of the King was before the first and only
and when
time
you put
I
new
read
information in, the old information falls out.
No.
No, that's the way it works.
No, but what I mean is probably, like, that would have jumped out at me, but I don't think I had a clue who Orome was, and I just probably was like, I didn't know what Valar, didn't know any of that, and I was just probably just went over my head. I was like, that's probably some fucking old man in some old battle that, it sounds like an old wooden ship. But
Civil Warrior.
Yeah, but yeah, that's incredible. I find that kind of mind blowing that Orome is mentioned there in that little scene.
It is cool, isn't it? I love the description saying, Fey he seemed.
Orome the hunter, right?
Yeah, Orome was the hunter, that's right. So Fey he seemed, or the battle fury of his fathers ran like new fire in his veins. Like, there's so much amazing imagery and how that's described. Now, I'm not done reading. There's still more reading to be done, because that's the end of the chapter. That's the end of the chapter. The next chapter is entitled The Battle of the Peleannor Fields. So we haven't even started the battle yet. Like, that's just the charge into it. So, and also, it is really cool because I want to just start the next chapter reading from the beginning, because what's really cool is the next chapter opens from the perspective of the Witch King. And it says, so I'll just read this little opening paragraph. It says, But it was no orc chieftain or brigand that led the assault upon Gondor. The darkness was breaking too soon, before the date that his master had set for it. Fortune had betrayed him for the moment, and the world had turned against him. Victory was slipping from his grasp, even as he stretched out his hand to seize it. But his arm was long, He was still in command, wielding great powers. King, Ringwraith, Lord of the Nazgul. He had many weapons. He left the gate and vanished. So it's like, I love that it's just like suddenly you're in the perspective of the Witch King, and he's kind of saying how darkness was breaking too soon before the date that his master had set for it. So it's like Sauron had set a date for, and he's like, what's going on? Like, why is it becoming bright already? That's not the plan. And he's like, don't worry, I'm still the king. I'm still a Nazgul. I've got this under control. Hold it together, man.
Oh yeah, no, that's pretty cool.
That's class, isn't it?
There's always a random switch of perspective. If it's not the Witch King, it's to a random fox on the travels.
You're not wrong, David. You're not wrong.
Not wrong. By the way, for anyone, like, we will probably talk about that fox in greater detail, but also the Valar. If people are wondering what the hell we're talking about with the Rome, the Hunter, and blah blah, we're probably going to do a little episode on the Valar, just like a simplified version before we go doing deep dives on each member of the Valar.
We may do that in time, yeah. But we'll definitely do an overview of the Valar,
the hierarchy.
And, maybe a few of them are. Moving on to the next little scene that I want to get to, there's a really, really cool, probably one of the most important moments of Theoden in the battle. Not just the charge and not his death. Another moment that we get to see, which is not in the films at all, is where he defeats the leader of the Southron army. So it's the chieftain of the Southern army, I should say. So I'm moving on down here to another part where I'm going to read, and it says, talking about this chieftain, it says, and he looked out, and in the growing light he saw the banner of the king, and that it was far ahead of the battle, with few men about it. Then he was filled with a red wrath, and shouted aloud, and displayed his standard, black serpent upon scarlet. He came against the white horse and the green, with the great press of men. Sorry, I had to turn the page there.
You couldn't have just learnt that part off, no, like, of men.
What is it, men?
What does it say at the end of the book? The
Should I wait for it? End. Okay, right. So, let's just go back on that again. So, basically, this guy, he's got his own standard. It's a black serpent upon a scarlet background. Standard. And it says, standard enough. And he came against the white horse and the green, with great press of men, and the drawing of the scimitars of the Southrons was like a glitter of stars. Scimitars obviously are swords, for anybody that isn't sure of that, so that's cool, like comparing them drawing their swords like a glitter of stars. Then Theoden was aware of him, and would not wait for his onset, but crying to snowmen, crying to snowmen, there's all these snowmen around the place, crying to snowmen, he charged headlong to greet him. Great was the clash of their meeting, but the white fury of the Northmen burned the hotter, and more skilled was their knighthood with long spears and bitter. Fewer were they, but they clove through the Southrons like a firebolt in a forest. Right through the press drove Theoden, Thengil's son, and his spear was shivered as he threw down their chieftain. Out swept his sword, and he spurred to the standard, huge staff and bearer, and the black serpent foundered. Then all was left unslain of their cavalry turned and fled far away. So that's a cool moment there of Theoden coming face to face with this chieftain and like slaying him, and then slaying loads of other people, and basically then everybody that was left unslain turned around and ran away in fear. So pretty cool.
And he slew them thereafter.
He was slaying and slewing all over the place. So jumping on forward then now, it says, up, Erlingus, fear no darkness. But Snowmen, wild with terror, stood up on high, fighting with the air, and then with a great scream he crashed upon his side. A black dart had pierced him. The king fell beneath him. So a black dart had pierced Snowmen. The Witch King was just, I skipped over that part there, but the Witch King was basically coming down. They see this huge shadow above them, and they're all terrified, and they can feel his presence coming. So
big change there, obviously, from the movies. Yeah,
exactly, of course. There's also a part I'm going to skip here, which is just really, really detailed description of the fell beast. It's pretty sick, but I just don't have time really to get into it. But it moves on, and it says that the Lord of the Nazgul, to the air he had returned, summoning his steed ere the darkness failed, and now he was come again, bringing ruin, turning hope to despair and victory to death. A great black mace he wielded, but Theoden was not utterly forsaken. The knights of his house lay slain about him, or else mastered by the madness of their steeds, they were borne far away. Yet one still stood there, Helm the young, faithful beyond fear, and he wept, for he had loved his lord as a father. Right through the charge, Merry had been borne unarmed behind him. So this is Helm, aka
Éowyn.
Éowyn.
Yeah, that was
correct.
her. That was her little alias.
That was her alias, exactly.
Éowys.
So again, another little change there, that Éowyn has an alias, which is Helm. She travels with Merry all the way to the battle, and all that time Merry doesn't know who she is. She thinks she's a young man called Helm. So and even in this moment in the book, we don't know that that's Éowyn. We're like, oh, Helm, we got to know him the last few pages because he, befriended Merry and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of cool that like she has a secret identity and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, yeah. Moving on, that Theoden, he's not alone. He's actually unknown to him that Éowyn and Merry are there to defend him. Even though, of course, Merry is actually paralyzed with fear at this moment. It kind of says that he can't even move, and it's just Éowyn on her own, kind of facing the Nazgul. And then
actually paralyzed.
Yeah, he's from the neck down. Yeah,
his body's broken.
Éowyn, of course, then decapitates the winged beast and faces the Witch King, who then is stabbed from behind by Merry, and then she deals the killing blow. After which she falls unconscious. And it is actually Merry who goes to the fallen king's side, believing him dead, and kisses his hand. And Theoden opened his eyes, and they were clear, and he spoke in a quiet voice, and it says, quote,
I know
farewell. What was your name again?
No.
Merry,
are you Pippin?
Yeah. So there's a quote here, and he says, farewell, my body is broken. I go to my fathers, and even in their mighty company, I shall not now be ashamed. So again, very, very similar to the quote from the film. And then he actually asks for Éomer, and he wants to send word to Éowyn, who he calls dearer than daughter. And he manages to hang on until Éomer comes to his side, and he indicates that his banner be given to his nephew. And then he says to his nephew, hail, King of the Mark. And he says, ride now to victory. Bid Éowyn farewell. And so he died, and knew not that Éowyn lay near him.
Oh, that's so awful, isn't it?
It's a little bit sad. Yeah, a little bit more sad than him getting to have his, final chat with his dearer than daughter, his niece, which I think is a really beautiful description as well.
They obviously switch that in the movies as well. They change a lot in the movies, but it's Éowyn that gets to see him before he dies, rather than
Merry.
And Éomer, I suppose, but like his two nephews and nieces.
Yeah. So then Éowyn passes out, and it's actually cool. There's another just very small things that I wanted to mention here, which is that in Theoden's speech, obviously a huge part of his speech in the film was the death, the shout of death, which wasn't any part of his speech in the book, but it does come from another place, which is that was actually taken from a scene a few pages later when Éomer finds his sister, and he thinks that she's dead, and she's unconscious. She's there. She's suffering from the Black Breath, but he thinks that she's dead. And then basically he's stunned, and he says, Éowyn, how come you here? What madness or devilry is this? Death, 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 take us all. And he turns and he rides back to the front of the army, and he initiates another charge, and he shouts, death, ride to ruin and the world's ending. And then all the Rohirrim join in, and they all roar death as they sweep onwards. So that's kind of like another, but he's shouting death, and he's also, that's another thing, and the world's ending. That's another quote that's put in the film in a different place. Yeah. But he's shouting death, ride to ruin and the world's ending, because he's just like, oh, my sister's just died and everything's going to shit and whatever. And then they all join in. Yeah, the king is dead. My sister, I'm the king now. My sister is now dead as well, and so it's a lot of heartache that he's going through, and he's shouting this death, and then they all join in, they all shout death. So it's cool that, again, if it's not included in where it is in the book, Peter Jackson or Fran Walsh or whoever has actually managed to put it in a different place, isn't it?
It kind of makes you think, like, actually, when you're reading the book and you have these quotes and you're like, kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense when they've like taken loads of little bits from the book and then put it into this one like epic speech. And obviously we both love it, but like I remember always wondering when I was a kid, like, first of all, what are they shouting there? And then when I knew that they were shouting death, I was like, why are they doing that now? Why are they shouting death? But the actual context of the book makes a lot more sense. But I don't care. It's still epic in the film.
I mean, it still makes a lot of sense in your mind just to be shouting death as you're charging forward to like basically your own death and the death of hopefully hundreds of your foes.
I like how Peter Jackson has created his own little themes within a world that already has themes. Like, for example, probably the theme of death for Theoden and Rohan. Like, a lot of the stuff, like he says, for death and glory. Like, he's obsessed with death and glory, and I suppose that's what he's shouting as he's riding down. So it doesn't seem out of place whatsoever. So that's what I like, and I like how Tolkien has his themes. Peter Jackson uses them, but also adds in some of his own, which is great.
Yeah, totally agree.
Theoden King stands alone.
Just very quickly, I'm going to give you a little breakdown of the aftermath of the battle then and what happens to Theoden. So Theoden's men carry his body to Minas Tirith, where he is laid in the Hallows, or the Houses of the Dead, until Sauron's defeat. And then Aragorn is crowned king. And after the days of rejoicing are over, Eomer and his men come from Rohan and they take their king home. And it says that King Theoden is borne up on a golden bier, which is like a German beer. A beer, B-I-E-R, is like a platform that you put a coffin on. And beer. Yeah. So he's borne up on a golden bier and passed through the city in silence. Then they laid the bier on a great wain, with riders of Rohan all about it, and his banner borne before. And Merry, being Theoden's esquire, rode upon the wain. In the company rode Aragorn and Queen Arwen, with Frodo and Samwise, Gandalf, Pippin with the Knights of Gondor, and Legolas and Gimli, Celeborn and Galadriel, Elrond and his sons, and many captains and knights. Never had any king of the mark such company upon the road as went with Theoden, Thengil's son, to the land of his home.
That's beautiful.
Beautiful.
So what's a wain?
Ends a wain. It's a good question. I'm not going to weigh in on this particular issue because I don't know. Yeah.
So it's not like a small child from Northern Ireland. A wee Wayne.
A Wayne. It's not someone whose surname is Rudy.
Yeah, it's not the top goal scorer of Man United, no.
Yeah, we could go for more puns all day, but we're not going to give you the actual real meaning of the word Wayne. W-A-I-N. No. But Google I imagine it's like the company or some sort of could be a float. Maybe it was like a parade. I don't know. But
oh, here comes the Theoden Wayne. Oh yeah, and they're throwing out candies. Yeah. So there you go. That's basically Theoden's life, and I'm going to just quickly give you a couple of movie moments which in my opinion maybe slightly take away from Theoden's character, because then we get to see how good his character is in the books. And like we've mentioned a few of them already, so I'm just going to mention them again just to kind of say this is like my little list that I made. So and again, I think that these are brilliantly done in the films, and they really maybe create some sort of a dramatic effect, and sometimes they create tension when maybe there isn't so much tension there. But they can slightly take away from Theoden's character, and you're kind of going, he didn't actually do that. So first, the detriment of his character, like,
a little bit. I mean, I think sometimes they take away from his character, and then they kind of give it back in to say, no, he kind of knew what he was doing. But it's kind of it's like first impressions. First impressions are really important. So one of those ones is that we've already spoken about, his treatment of Grima and his kind of basically attempted murder, which has to be stopped by Aragorn. And again, Grima, maybe he deserves death, but we definitely see a king who's lost all control.
That is not for him to judge.
Yeah, that is not for him to decide. All you have to decide is who you're going to kill, Grima or Hama.
Maybe he does deserve death.
Yeah. And some who die deserve life. Can you give it to them, Frodo? We should stop just quoting random stuff. But anyway, so, sorry, I was going to say that we see a king who's completely lost control and then is undermined by Aragorn. Aragorn's like, no, don't do that. Don't be a feckin' idiot. And then he's also, as I said earlier as well, it's quickly followed by the fealty of his people, where they say, "Hail Theoden King," and all the people are like, oh, I suppose we have to get down on one knee now and be like, whatever. And again, this is not true at all in the book. And as I said in the book, the people, they love Theoden. Like, they're really, like, they're, you know, they're all over him. And he is gracious to Grima, and he's like, you know, he allows him to live, and he wants to kind of give him a second chance almost. So that's like basically our first impression of this Theoden king. And as I said, there is another moment, which is when Aragorn questions his strategies in front of the others by telling him that the Uruk-hai aren't coming to destroy Rohan's houses and his crops, but his people, and that leads to the great, like, where was Gondor speech.
Yeah.
And again, it kind of creeps into our mind that Theoden's judgment is off. But again, like, we're pretty much immediately corrected on this as Theoden gets angry at Aragorn, showing that he understands the gravity of the situation and he's trying to put on a brave face to encourage his men. So he is actually a good king and a good leader. But just, it kind of creeps in a moment of like, oh, Theoden's not really making the right decision here. And so it's kind of, I think it all just kind of chips away a little bit at his character. So there's another one as well, which is, sorry, do you want to comment on that?
No, I was just going to say like that it is for dramatic tension and keeps the viewers guessing, especially for this big, massive battle at the end. And you're thinking, imagine if half of the world of men's forces is just like deciding to stubbornly stay put. That's a lot of alliteration there. Deciding to stubbornly stay put.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. Another thing I just wanted to mention there. Now it's just a random thing. Where when he comes out and he's about to like murder Grima in cold blood, and then like just after that little shenanigans, someone goes, "Hail Theoden, King," or whatever. I never got the impression like the crowd are like, "Oh god, like feck this." I just got the impression that like he literally hasn't been outside in a long time, and anytime he's like amongst his people, there's someone that just yells like, "Hail King," and then they just have to bow down.
I'm sure. Oh yeah. No, I'm sure you're right. But they all.
But you're saying like normally they'd be jumping around, but like
not jumping, but they'd be like, oh my, it'd be like seeing a celebrity, like you're like, oh my god, look at that, like, you know, it wouldn't be. They're all
like seeing a celebrity like come out of his own house.
yeah, but like I mean, if you live beside him, you're like, oh, there he is again. Oh, let's get a selfie. You know? I don't know. But it's like, they're just like, I don't know, I just particularly remember there's definitely an older woman that's like an extra, and she's like wearing all black, and she's got this like cloak that she wraps around herself, and she's got this like big like pus on her face, and she's like kneeling down, and it's like she just looks like she doesn't want to be there. But anyway,
she's like the Proudfoot Hobbit where he's just like
proud feet. Yeah, so then just quickly going on, there is another moment where Aragorn suggests standing and fighting and protecting his people against this open war. And here Theoden suggests Helm's Deep as an option, and Gandalf doesn't agree. And Gandalf has a quote, and he says, "They flee to the mountains when they should stand and fight. Who will defend them if not their king? There is no way out of that ravine. Theoden is walking into a trap. He thinks he's leading them to safety. What they'll get is a massacre." And from a movie standpoint, Gandalf has really built up a lot of credibility by this point. So we're very happy to side with him. And again, this kind of lessens our opinion of Theoden as a tactician from early on in our relationship with this character. And it's almost like, again, one of our first impressions. And we're kind of going, he's not really making the best decisions, this lad here. And again, I especially don't like this because later on, someone says, I can't remember who it is in the movie, someone says that they actually stand a better chance of defending themselves at Helm's Deep than they would at Edros. This is like after they realise, holy shit, Saruman's got an army of tens of thousands. No, it's someone on, it's either...
But Grima also hints at that. He says like they won't stay at Edoras. They'll go to flee to Helm's Deep.
No, he says that they'll do that. But like, you know, they're like Gandalf is like they should stay and fight. They shouldn't run away to Helm's Deep. But at that point, none of the good guys know that there's a huge army of Uruk-hai.
Okay, fair.
They all think, if they stay at Edoras, they'll be able to defend themselves because it'll be an army of, you know, rabble orcs, whatever. But then when they actually realize that there's this huge army of 10,000, they're like, I can't remember who it is, but I watched. I picked up on it the last time we watched the films there a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, oh, somebody actually mentions one of the Fellowship, I think it is, says that they stand a much better chance defending from Helm's Deep. So, I mean, he's proven right that was the correct decision to go there, but it's a bit too late. We've already had that moment where we're kind of like, oh, Theoden, he doesn't really know how to, you know, get his tactics in order and all that kind of stuff. And then the final one is that where he agrees to Denethor's request immediately when he receives that red arrow. He's like, yeah, let's go, let's defend them. Yeah. So again, obviously, there's a nice little bit of tension that's created in the films. It's like, why would we be doing that if they weren't coming over to us and helping us out? And it's like, you understand the reason for it, just to kind of be like, so the audience is like, oh, maybe he's going to be bitter and he's not going to do it, but then, and then eventually he gives in. But like, his actual character of this real guy, the real character of Theoden was just to be immediately like, of course we'll go to the aid of Gondor. So there you go. There's a few little things there that, again, not saying that I dislike film Theoden. I still absolutely love that guy to death, but to death. And
no, we've talked about not just characters,
I love him to death and glory.
Plenty of things. Plenty of things. There's no way. There's not really any way you can make a perfect. Not even a perfect adaptation, but like a fully faithful adaptation for anything, because it just doesn't translate, especially these books that were written back in the fucking 50s or 60s or whenever they were written. Like you can't just faithfully adapt that in the 21st century. It just won't translate well. And you need to build tension. You need to have the warrior's journey and all these kind of things, and like they still did a masterful they still did a masterful job with the whole thing. So yeah, I don't begrudge them, but like, yeah, I think they do make up for a lot of Theoden's faults. And like you've mentioned, we love him anyways.
we love him. And yeah, you're right. They don't want to build tension. They want to build tension. Oh god,
I think it's getting late.
It's getting late. We are about to finish. I want to give you one little tidbit before we say goodnight and farewell, and that is, is Bernard Hill right or left-handed, Dave?
Well, I'm going to guess left-handed because he wouldn't ask me this question.
Of course,
but
would make sense. But where do we see that in the film play out? I'm surprised you. I've always picked up with this.
Really, I've never noticed. Because I'm guessing it's not where he handles his sword. Is it where he handles his sword? Yeah. Does he grab it with his left hand?
He grabs it with his left hand. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. I can see. But like, I always think the way he grabs it is really like, I haven't used my hands in a long time, so I feel like I wouldn't even care if it was his left or his right hand. Because his fingers
haven't remembered their own strength yet, Dave, because he's about to grab his sword.
He just needs to get his sword and go swishing about.
So Bernard Hill is left-handed, and in that scene, I always like, and also he wears his sword on his right hip. So you can see that he is left-handed. Now, that's not a big deal. It's not like a crazy tidbit, but there is another scene which is where he is during his speech, when he's charging on his horse and he's holding his sword up and he has to clash his sword off the spears. Which hand is he holding his sword in?
It must be, it's the right hand, because he's coming towards the screen.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And that's not mirrored. He was told he had to use his right hand, and if you watch it closely, his sword is a bit wobbly in that scene where he's like, it's not very steady. Yeah. So,
well, I mean, you'd want to keep it wobbly, because if it's steady, he's chopping off all the heads of the spears.
Yeah. I know. I always kind of thought that when I was watching it when I was younger. I was like, he's going to break all those spears before they even start the battle. But obviously he's just like banging them into me. He's not actually slicing them through the wood, which would be quite difficult. But there's just something that I've seen before and that I read online that apparently there's, I can't remember if he talks about it, but he was like saying it was difficult to try to hold the sword steady on his right when he's like charging on the horse, and hold up your weak hand. He
has to use his weak hand, or he has to use his weak hand for the horse, or like his strong hand. But it's your weak hand when you're riding.
Yeah. So he's riding on the horse, holding up a sword with his weak hand and banging his sword into all these spears that are sticking out. So like you're riding a horse right beside all these big, huge spears, and you're just like, that's dangerous enough as it is. But then using your weak hand to do it, and so his hand is a little bit wobbly in it. But
and the cool thing is like, like a lot of people could come back and say, well, why the hell did they do that? Why didn't they just film him coming towards the camera, the other side? With his left hand, and he's just riding towards. But like, that is, and
then like flip it or something.
Well, no, just like ride the opposite way and just
I suppose the sun was rising that kind of way, and I don't know.
Well, the thing is, a lot of filmmakers always choose to put the enemy on the left, or sorry, the good guys on the left and the bad guys on the right. Just in any kind of battle, that's always a thing. And there is a famous battle. Now, I don't remember what it is, but where they're the bad guy, but they flip it, and it actually is because basically there is a turn of allegiance or something like that. Now, I'd love to remember what that is. But by the way, just since we're talking about Bernard Hill, I do have a tidbit for you as well.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, just that this is a fact about him, that he is the only actor in history who's been in $2 billion movies that won 11 Oscars, which is incredible because there's only 3 films that have won 11 Oscars. And can you name them, John?
The Return of the King, Titanic, and Ben-Hur.
Well done. Yeah, so obviously he plays the captain in Titanic, and he says famously in that movie, "For death and glory."
He says, "Arise, riders of Theoden."
Arise, ship, please, arise. We're
Theoden.
sinking.
Yeah, so there you go. That's Theoden. That's our boy. Dave and I are especially fond of the scene where he's saying, "Who am I gambling?" And
where am I shoes gambling?
An old senile king is like, "Where am I gambling?"
Who am I gambling? You are our king, sire.
So yeah, that is our King of Rohan, our King Theoden, one of the most amazing characters on the pages of the Lord of the Rings books and on the screens. And again, Bernard Hill, I think one of the standout performers, maybe one of those kind of actors that kind of flies a little bit under the radar because he's not part of the Fellowship gang.
Definitely.
But maybe if you're to think outside the Fellowship, who is the maybe most recognizable, who is the most important, probably would be Theoden. I definitely think that for the good guys to actually win the battle and the war, I think he was such an important and integral part.
Yeah, and I think like even in the marketing of the movies, like I can't really think off the top of my head of a single. He must be in some of the trailers, but like I think he has a tiny little piece on the posters where he's not like a prominent figure. He's not one of the heads in any of the 3 posters. I'm just trying to think of it off the top of my head because it's often like one of those things when you're thinking of Lord of the Rings characters and you're thinking of the movies and you're going through all the Fellowship, then you've got like Gollum, then you've got Cate Blanchett and the elves and then
Saruman,
you kind of start to
Sauron.
Saruman, yeah, exactly. And like Theoden, you're just like, he's such a badass.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say as well before we finished up, I'm so glad that we're back, and since we are talking about Theoden, I thought it'd be cool if our listeners could say something. Maybe you could type Fourth Aer Lingus or Theoden or Arise or something like that on whatever podcast stream you're listening to, maybe a comment section on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this, even if it's just a comment under the tweet that we share about this podcast. But I want to hear the guy. Let's say Fourth Aer Lingus. That makes most sense. So why doesn't everyone just like tweet that below, and then we can hear everyone's collective voice. I think that'd be pretty awesome.
If you appreciate Theoden as much as we do, or if you appreciate him more after listening to this podcast, we really hope that that's been a nice deep dive, lore heavy, lots of information. Quite a lot in this, but he's a very, very important character. And I know I did a lot of readings, but I just absolutely love some of those scenes from the book. They're just incredible. But sorry, I was going to mention as well.
Johnny.
I mentioned earlier on in this podcast that there are 3 moments in the 3 films that really kind of get me, and I pretty much I can't have a dry eye after any time after watching these. You can.
Okay, so obviously Boromir's death. I'd put that as number 1. Then we obviously discussed the Theoden's death, or specifically where he says about his his forefathers. Right, number 3. I haven't thought about it. I just wanted to get in there. Give me some clues.
Well done on the first 2 because I already told you in this episode, so you were actually listening to me.
Okay, give me the movie and I'll give you
2 Towers.
2 Towers, right.
And I'll give you another very big clue. Will
okay.
I? No, I won't. 2 Towers.
Yeah.
What's the biggest tearjerker moment in 2 Towers? I mentioned the scene in this podcast.
You're hardly talking about when Eowyn cries when she sees Theoden coming back to...
Nope. Again, we mentioned it that maybe happy moments don't really get me as much as the sad moments. They do at times, like again, You Bow to No One is kind of a really happy and uplifting moment. And it does. That is a nice... I would say that gets me 80% of the time. But there's about 20% of the time I watch it and I'm dry eyes, Dave. Don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
80% of the time gets me every time.
Okay.
Give me another who.
One more clue. Big clue. It's by the character that this podcast has just been about.
Damn, I assumed so. Oh yeah, sorry, we talked about it already. Where he talks about no parent should have to bury their child. Yeah. I agree. I said I think that's the part that makes me cry the most as well. I kind of overlooked that.
Yeah.
I didn't do it in remembrance of this podcast.
It wasn't worthy of remembrance. But my point was going to be that there's 3 moments over the course of the 12 or 13 hours or whatever it is. And Theoden has 2 of them that really kind of make me well up and cry, I think.
That's true.
So that's, if, we'll say no more. That's enough to give him enough reason for him to be one of the most important characters. And should be a lot more fan favorites. Or should be a lot more fans' favorite character out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are your 3, and I'm gonna just jump on the bandwagon and say those are my 3 as well. I want to hear everyone else's 3, so send them in.
But only 3.
And also, only 3, and I also want to hear everyone say 4th Aer Lingus, because we've missed you guys, and I want to know if you want us to still produce podcast episodes every week. Or not.
Hopefully the answer is yes. Because if you say no, we're just going to ignore it.
Cry.
We're going to do it anyway.
That would be my biggest tearjerker, is nobody commenting at all. But yeah, come on, I want to hear some comments.
Yeah.
Or read them.
Now for wrath, now for ruin, and the red dawn.
Well, that just about covers it for today's episode, folks. We really hope you enjoyed tuning in to part 2 of this deep dive into the master of the Riddermark, Theoden King. We certainly had a lot of fun making it, and we're going to keep the fun rolling as we reform the line and gather our full strength to power through this new season with all our loyal melons. As always, we would be delighted if you could leave us a 5-star rating on whatever platform you're using, and perhaps consider dropping a comment just to help the algorithm do its thing. We appreciate all the support as always, and it's so great to have the #1 online community supporting us. And if you're not already doing so, please go check out our socials and follow us on Twitter at melon_heads. Remember, that's always with 2 L's. And you can also see us do these podcasts with your eyes and not just your ears on YouTube at the Melonheads, the Council of Elrond podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in again to the #1 Lord of the Rings podcast, and we'll see you next time on the Council of Elrond.